Well, back again for the 8th episode of the Friday Council. Daniel, how you doing?
Great, man. It's a beautiful day.
It's nice to see you. It's nice the sun's shining after a bit of snow yesterday.
Swag.
A little bit of a fizzer though. I thought it would be
A
quite
little bit flaccid.
more intense than it was, but
Snow always ends up being a bit flaccid.
Yeah.
How you been, David?
Yeah, can't complain. Yeah, glad the sun's out.
yep, another week gone by.
Another week gone by. What are we chatting today? What do we reckon?
Well, I think we were talking about earlier in the week what topic we thought would be good to deep dive into, and listening back to some of the stuff that we've recorded. One of the topics that kept coming up was boundaries. And so we thought, why not just have a nice friendly conversation about boundaries.
I think you probably have, as perhaps more than me and David, a background in literature and content about boundaries. It's not something I'd ever really explicitly thought about, to be honest. I knew what it refers to when you say boundaries and making boundaries, but do you have an affinity to learning about it, or something happen, or your life is kind of in a way that made you think about boundaries in the first place?
Yeah, a bit of mixture of both, I guess. This book that I brought with me called Boundaries: When to Say Yes, When to Say No to Take Control of Your Life. So that's a book I read, which gave some good insight into boundaries, explained what they were, the different types of boundaries, which we can go into a bit later. But I guess kind of with boundaries was just learning how to say no was the main thing. And also from that, I guess, like I figured when I was living at home, there were times where it was quite intrusive of my time and I'd get quite frustrated. So I needed to sort of learn about like boundaries, where it's okay for, someone to, I want to say it's like a time thing. It's not always about time, but that when I was at home, there's just unannounced visits to your bedroom and just like frustration of thinking, like dad would want some help with something and you're busy, and like how do you navigate that? Because you're living under your parents' roof, but also you're autonomous. No, you need your own time, you need your own life.
Yeah, and I think the feelings of frustration, or whatever the feelings are when you realised you haven't had or you've ignored some boundaries that you've had, I think you can feel, don't know if you guys agree, you feel like kind of frustrated, or I don't know what the emotion is, disappointed in the other, and at the person who's done that to you, like frustrated them. But I think maybe it's directed at resentment at other people. But I think it could be possibly just like disappointment in yourself, masked as resentment for someone else. Like, I should have. Why did I do that? It's not. I mean, because it's not their fault really. But I mean, some people can take you for a ride, I'm sure, when you don't have any boundaries.
I know exactly what you mean. It's that. Yeah, I think it's ultimately you're pissed off with yourself, but you put it on the other person because you're like, that's, I guess, a way of.
It's like their fault. They asked you to do something, and then you said yes.
Yeah,
it's like, nah, it's probably your fault.
Yeah.
I was thinking as well. I think it probably, in my like thinking about it consciously for the first time, I was like, I think it's just like valuing other people's opinions more than yourself, and like caring too much about what other people think about you. So obviously, I think the main reason someone doesn't have a boundary or lets someone take advantage of them, or they're always doing something for other people, is because they don't want to cause drama, or they don't want the other person to think lowly of them.
Yeah,
but I think essentially you got to, one, obviously back yourself more, but also just give less of a shit about what other people think. And that's like some cereal box wisdom anyway. Like, don't give a shit what other people say, You can't live your life based on other people's opinions of you and whatnot. But I think that's where the boundarylessness comes from.
Yeah, there's always
makes sense.
The thing with living life there's always balance in everything. So
Yeah, a boring middle ground balance.
Boring middle
It's what
ground of
everything
balance.
comes back to, I swear.
because in some, like I think we talked about last episode, or might have been before, trying new things versus saying no and knowing what you actually want to do, or like where it's firm. Like if you're not interested in something, there's a bit of healthiness to both. Boundaries in like time, for example, because I just, as you get older, time is so valuable. You just don't have enough of it. It always seems like people say you can always make more money, but you can never make more time. So you've got to be very strict or disciplined with your time. It reminded me last night, I tried so hard, but I got caught in the social media trap again. I ended up wasting 45 minutes of mindless
Damn. And that's kind of
scrolling
breaking of a boundary for yourself.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
a self-imposed boundary that you've
it's
just broken.
it's frustrating, but also like aware of it afterwards. Like, man, failed again.
Yeah,
but
yeah. And
constantly striving, I guess.
it's that disappointment in yourself. I think that is where it comes from. And like I mentioned previously, I don't know quite how to explain it. Someone must have come up with a term for it, but it's like when you're like backstabbing your possible future better self, or the self you want to be, and in the back, it's like I said, when you say, oh, I'm going to eat healthy next week, and then you don't,
Yeah.
and you've kind of just etched away, or like that part of you that's like the amazing you in the future that you can imagine or want to be is just like crumbled away a little bit because you've just ignored it. You haven't fostered
Congratulations, you've played yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It's the meme, man.
Yeah, it's the meme. Yeah, there's truth to that.
Yeah, so when you're not sticking by your guns and your boundaries, I think you're doing that again. You're just like crumbling away your what you could be, and that's no good. I also reckon nowadays, so super distracted, cluttered lives, I think time, possibly more now than ever, is even more valuable, because we've just got so much, so many distractions and whatnot. And some people make the critique of like they call it like the post-capitalist society. So we're past the point of like products being a product-based economy now, and we all hear about the attention economy. So
Yeah.
like our lives are full of products now, and now it's a case of our attention that they're competing for. So
Yeah.
so everything, so we're full up basically. If we want to, you can live a full, super busy life super easily, and if you don't like consciously decide what you want and put boundaries up, you're gonna get screwed. I think now more than ever.
Yeah, particularly with like social media, for example. So I think we'll take YouTube as an example. I remember growing up watching YouTube, and there was a sweet spot where videos were, I think most of them, like 5 minutes long, or like, trying to take a bit of time. And then there was that next step where it was like half an hour videos were like, there's no point watching it if it's not like a decent chunk of time. And now I feel like it's switched completely back with, now you've got TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. They're all the same, where it's like short snippets of time, and it, like, you don't think about it, but you stack it on top of each other, just constantly,
Like it gives the illusion
give
of
the-
getting
yeah.
a lot done. You're
Yeah.
like getting heaps done. You're powering through heaps of content, but obviously it's not.
but it is it's a huge boundary, I guess, to succeeding or to utilizing your time efficiently if you're wanting to improve or to make big steps
Yeah,
in
for
bettering
sure.
yourself.
Boundaries are everywhere. The more you think about it consciously and look at it, you realize how many boundaries you have in your life that you're either breaking all the time, or that you've set up and are functioning well. Like even between personalities, like everyone has split personality disorder to a certain extent. Like you're going to be a different person at work than you are hanging around with your best friends, than you are hanging around with old friends, than you are hanging around with your parents. Like they're all boundaries between personalities. So they're everywhere, man. And you've really got to,
That's an interesting point, and I think you see that a really good example actually of that is when you had a relief teacher, a reliever at school, and the class would go nuts because they knew that there's like a different set of rules.
The old boundaries are gone.
The boundaries are gone, yeah, and if you didn't have a strong reliever, they would just crumble. So I think that's really a really good point, how boundaries change depending on who the person is. If you really respect that person's authority, whether that be the teacher or the parents, that you won't swear in front of them or whatever it may be, but then to another person you will. And I think, that's a really good point, where some people...
that's a good example. Yeah, I think it comes from you respecting their boundaries almost.
Exactly.
There's a selfish element to it as well. Like with the teacher example, it's a good example where there'll be punishments or consequences for you yourself, but ultimately, like a good teacher, you respect their boundaries as specified by them in their classroom rules or whatever at the start of the year. So respecting other people's boundaries is a whole another side of it as well, and not being offended when someone puts up or tells you something that seems unreasonable to you. They just go, I just don't want to do it, I just don't want to hang out or whatever. It's not for me.
Offense is one of the big things that prevents you from setting healthy boundaries. It's just one that I struggled with in the beginning, when someone wasn't like keen or interested in hanging out, and I'd take offense to it, like, they just don't want to spend time with me, or, they're too busy, got things going on, like, I'm not valuable to them. So it's like, it puts it, when it's on the other foot, like, and you're trying to set boundaries against other people, or once you've experienced that yourself, like the other end of it, it comes a lot easier. It's a good thing to have boundaries. So realizing why other people put boundaries up against you and having your own boundaries against other people is just like sort of the equilibrium to a healthy life.
It's about respect, Respect for yourself and for other people. Yeah,
I think it's sort of counterintuitive where you may certainly initially feel that like you're the one being selfish by putting boundaries in place, saying no, I don't want to hang out or whatever it may be, but it's in most cases actually reverse, where it's the person asking your time that's being selfish because they want your time, and then if you don't give it to them, if they get upset, then that's actually them being selfish because they're saying they're angry because you're so it's actually flipped, where if you might feel like you're the one being selfish, but it's actually the other person that's genuinely being selfish because they want your time, and then if you don't give it to them, they get upset. Well, and
then they're the kind of people that they can be nice people with good intentions and not realize it themselves. Not be conscious of it.
And
but
I think that's
no big loss,
because
really,
for a lot of us, if not all of us, you don't really get taught these things at school, and you don't get taught them by your parents, and that's what I mean. You often get, and I can only speak for myself, but I see these sort of toxic traits in my parents. Traits maybe not the right word, but where they don't,
ding, 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 ding.
where they don't,
parents referenced,
where they don't set these boundaries because they obviously never got taught them, and that's what I mean. If nobody ever gets taught these boundaries, then you just like inherit like what your parents did or what your teachers taught you and whatnot. So you've actually got to sort of consciously sit down and learn these things, and then if you have children, hopefully consciously teach them, because if you don't teach them, then you're relying on them just stumbling across, figuring these things out, which most people don't figure out.
Yeah, I know. How are we not taught this? It's so important, man. I guess because it's really got nothing to do with, if you're looking at it pessimistically or cynically, it's nothing to do with it doesn't make any money or having boundaries, and in fact having less boundaries means you're more easily able to be taken advantage of in the workplace. Can you just do an extra hour and not get paid for it, or can you just do
a really good example?
Workplace boundaries are another.
That's a huge definitely. It's so easy to if it's like from I guess, sorry, what am I trying to say? Like if your boss, for example, is wanting you to stay extra time, but you're on a salary, right? So obviously there's reasons why you should, and there's obviously reasons why you shouldn't, because you're not getting paid per hour. But then if they're putting it on you from like you're not contributing to the team, or you don't want it to succeed. It's almost like manipulation. But we're humans. We need to have like a healthy work-life balance, or you're not going to give your best work output in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
But that's just one example, I guess, in terms of work. But like your family boundaries too. I think my sister once, like asked me to help move something, like move furniture or something, and it's like it was almost expected that I was going to do it. Where I said no, like I've got something else on, and her reaction like threw me off, because it was almost like, oh, you're not, like, you don't care, like you don't want to help. You've always like saying, I was like, where is this coming? Like, where did this come from? And it made me feel like guilty, like horrible and guilty. But then I was like, her reaction's not like my responsibility. Like I can help it. Like I was offering to help at another time, but just in that time, like it doesn't work. So I think with boundaries, like you need to be, I think the first thing is you need to be clear, like what you want, and to like straight up say like, no, I can't, no, first and foremost, no. Or then if you're wanting to provide other options, sure. But if you're clear about it, then if you're tiptoeing, that's where it can be like eggshells,
Yeah, I think you nailed it with knowing, being clear as well with yourself, what your boundaries are, and because we're not taught it. It's not nothing explicit, so you'd never realise half of them. I'm sure I don't realise half of them.
And I think
just really thought about it in the last few days.
Counterintuitively, again, is the more you set these boundaries, the more people respect you, as I say, where it's like before, where it's sort of, you'd think that you're the one being selfish by saying no, but it's actually that other person generally being selfish by wanting your time. And then it's like, once you say no a few times, that person knows, oh, he or she's not just going to say yes, drop everything and say yes. And so they actually become more respectful of your time, and then when you say no, they don't get offended any longer. And I've certainly had that happened to me personally, where I've said no to my parents, and the first couple of times I did it, they were sort of like, oh, well, you've really put us out. And then now they now come to expect that there's a good chance they say no, and then they move on to the next option, and it's all good. It's not like, oh, how could you? Yeah. So,
and having boundaries is super attractive, I think, in a person, not like as a sexual, not necessarily sexually attractive, but it's like an attractive, like a leader. If you think about the classic archetypal leader person, they have just boundaries almost. They're real clear where their boundaries are and what they stand for, what they will do and not do. And that's super attractive.
I was just thinking exactly what you're saying. Like I was thinking of an example of, say, for like a businessman or a politician whose time is very valuable. Generally, I want to say like Elon Musk, for example, like how much time, like, it's super important. But what he spends his time doing, most people would say, good on it. Like he knows what he wants. Like he's obviously a man out for success, and he wouldn't get there without having these boundaries in place.
Business, you need definitely clear boundaries. But you mentioned politics as well. I think that's a real good point. You want your politicians to have real strong boundaries, so you're real clear on what they're going to do and what they believe. You don't want a politician with no boundaries. He's going to be like, oh yeah, all right, we'll do that, blah blah blah. You want, it's the complete opposite of what you want. You want someone who knows their policies and will stick by them relatively steadfastly.
Yeah, and I think generally, like you can look at any successful person, and it's generally going to come down to they're really efficient with their time is the key thing, and a big part of that is setting boundaries. If you're constantly dropping everything to please other people, it's just going to be so hard to really get anything done. And so and that's the classic case of that, is sort of like a CEO or a manager or whatever, is they set really clear, for the most part. I'd say if they're not a good CEO or not a good manager, they might not set those boundaries, and then employees can start manipulating them and things like that, and it can get murky. But CEOs, and they have to be like ruthlessly efficient with their boundaries, and it's not easy to do, and that's why not everyone is a CEO.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, just the word boundaries implies a structure, and businesses, like a business, what's the term in business? It's not a business structure, it's not a business plan, it's like a business,
hierarchy.
effectively that, yeah. It's like how you're structuring your business, and any successful one has lots of structure, and if the most successful ones almost have the most structure. You think of like an Amazon or like the retail ones where it's
Standard operating procedures.
real soulless, but standard operating procedures. And so, I mean, bringing it back to like some kind of like abstract personal boundaries, implying structure. I think it's real important for your own like identity as well. Like we talked about alone time, learning that and putting those boundaries will create your personality, I think. Yeah, actually, I think that's probably really important, intimately related to personality.
Again, like it's an interesting one, like where I think if you're the sort of person who doesn't have like much social status or whatever you want to call it, and people are used to sort of getting your time without any boundaries, like people respect you less. But again, we can all think of like the Prime Minister or something. Like no one would expect like to have like access to her or him if it was a him or whatever. If we think of again any sort of a rugby like Richie McCaw or something, like you wouldn't expect to like just be able to rock up to Richie McCaw's house and have a conversation with him, would you? No, like you would respect like it's going to be really hard to get a meeting with Richie McCaw. So again, it's sort of like counterintuitive where people respect you more. Like
I think that's why as well. You mentioned like a politician again. When a politician is pandering or is seen to be just like doing whatever's popular for the popular vote, I think that's also where that like distaste comes from the general public when they see a politician doing that, because it's showing them being boundaryless. They're kind of just flowing wherever, with the wind, and it shows no real backbone, and people get pissed off by that.
This is a good example. Like we all went to, won't say who it was, but we went to a political party MP speaking, and they would have hecklers in the background.
It was good,
and
that's the best part.
Yeah, which is like fair enough, but I think it was impressive. Although, like you may agree with what the heckler's saying, the speaker was clear front. Like, no, I'm not taking. Like, I'm not. Yeah, there's no time for this, and he would deflect and be like,
"Oh, heat."
Oh,
nails it down.
No, not necessarily. But yeah, it's like you having clear cut boundaries is very important.
Yeah. And I suppose your boundaries are just talking about like linking to your personality. I suppose boundaries are like the physical manifestation of your personality. That's where they come from. So that might be part of why as well it's so alluring or attractive, and you gain so much respect when you have boundaries. And counterintuitively, saying no implies negative, but also equally saying yes to the things that you do want to do, it garners a lot of respect.
Well, yeah, I just thought I'll mention, I'm just on this website here talking about advantages of healthy boundaries. So it's good for your mental health.
No doubt.
Good for your emotional health.
No doubt.
Develop autonomy.
No doubt.
So knowing what you want. Developing your own identity. This one we didn't really cover, but avoiding burnout.
Yeah.
And I think David mentioned influencing others' behaviour. So I guess
what does that one
well,
mean,
more in terms, I think, if you're clear with your boundaries and people are aware that, if your time's important or you can say no and be free in that, well, you're influencing them that they're not going to intrude on your boundaries.
Yes. Yeah. If you really think about it as well, I suppose even though nowadays is potentially the most cluttered time in terms of our space, our temporal space, we've got so much going on all the time, or so many options at least to have something going on all the time. I actually reckon it could be one of the easiest times to have those boundaries and not worry, in particular, not worrying about offending other people or, you know, losing some friends here and there that you don't really want to hang out with, but you kind of seem to be doing every week because they need you more than you need them, kind of thing. Because like with the internet, there's an infinite number of communities. If you're worried about losing a friend or losing friends, there's an infinite amount of potential friends online. And I just think we live such like atomized lives anyway. We're kind of quite isolated anyway, so you don't necessarily need, it's going to sound a bit weird, but you don't necessarily need to have that many people and friends around you so often. You can kind of whittle it down, I suppose, to the real good ones.
Yeah, and again,
good ones.
I think the like prime example of that, again, if you like look at any like really successful person, like they're probably not going to have like a huge like group of people that has like unlimited access to them. It's going to be a very small group of maybe 5 or 6 people that have, you know, ongoing access to that person without like getting, you know, through their personal assistant or whatever to book something in the future. Yeah.
I think I was watching a video of like a wealthy businessman, and he said he's got his personal phone where he's got about 30 people who, for whatever reason, whether that, you know, it could be family or super important business relationships, have access to this one phone, and then all the rest is on a complete different work phone. He'll get no notifications for that, and it's purely what he would use to conduct business.
That's a good example actually of using technology to make a boundary, whether you choose it or not. That's like, there's no way, that's like a very rigid, technologically enforced boundary, so you can't cheat yourself out of that one, because isn't
well, for me, one of mine, like I set up through my phone, like the do not disturb function turns on automatically Sunday to Thursday at 10 p.m. So I won't get any notifications unless I physically go into the app. And that's just good for me because it's like 10 o'clock, you know, kind of wanting to like wind down, get ready for the next day. Very easy to lose time when you're distracted. But at least if I choose to do something or reply to a message, it's my own doing.
Yes, yeah. That's actually good. That's got to be a real basic boundary, is turning off your notifications or phone at night. You don't want to be the boundary of your sleep. Like you're implying when you're asleep, because if someone doesn't know, they're going to message you. But so you need to actually take initiative to turn that off on your end. But you know, there's also your sleep should be a boundary. Your sleep time,
totally. 100%.
That should be probably one of the biggest boundaries.
It's good for your health, good for mental health too. Yeah. But I know someone who has made a rule with his wife, like no phones in the bedroom before bedtime. It's like he doesn't actually sleep with his phone in the bedroom. He has one of those old school, like, plug-in alarm clocks. But hey, man, good. If it works for you, it's
even just having your phone with the alarm on, like out or on the other side of the room, or at least outside the room, so you have to get up to turn it off. There's no.
I'd probably be at risk of not hearing it and sleeping right through.
Yeah,
but. Yeah.
Hello everyone, Daniel here. It was at this point in the podcast we experienced our very first technical difficulty. We realised the next 20 minutes of chat didn't record, so we spent the next half of the podcast trying to stumble our way back over everything we'd already talked about, kind of also coming up with some new stuff to talk about. It kind of killed the flow quite heavily, so hopefully throughout this stumbly second half, something of value can be gleaned. Enjoy.
What about parental relationships in relation to their boundaries? I'm thinking in terms of family boundaries are different. Obviously, they have a whole set of boundaries that aren't replicated anywhere else. But I think that's super important. That's probably where we get a lot of our boundaries from. You're talking about before, David, about parents just passing on, you know, like generational kind of ignorance or trauma or whatever you want to call it. And they're real formative for us, I guess.
Yeah, and you just would naturally pick up on what you learn from your parents, whether that's like subconsciously or consciously. Like it seems to just pass
Yeah, yeah.
through. So if you don't have healthy or learned boundaries, then you're doomed to repeat the same.
No doubt,
Yeah.
generation after generation, and boundary making and maintaining obviously requires that balance that we mentioned before, that kind of boring middle ground that seems to work. But I think in terms of like a family structure or a mother and father structure representing the like perhaps the motherly, you can relate to the mother being more like boundaryless, and you can go to her for anything, and she'll provide you with anything regardless of any regardless of any like caveats or whatever. And then the father is typically going to be represented more being rules based and very clear boundaries, almost overbearingly boundary driven.
Yeah.
But and somewhere in the middle is the best way to be. It's the best way to be, I think.
Yeah, I agree. We were talking about, like, as an example, having like a child who would, like an older child, be like addicted to drugs or alcohol, and
spending
money or stealing from the parents, and like as a parent, obviously you don't want to see your child suffering, but how would you navigate that, like, particular example, whilst having healthy boundaries and setting like clear expectations? Because you wouldn't be able to live like a regular lifestyle if it's just to keep repeating itself, like over time it's not healthy for the child, and you're not going to see them progress or to get a step ahead in life. So
it brings to mind the term healthy boundaries that you hear, and implying that there's unhealthy boundaries as well. So I mean, in a situation like that, if you have the means to figure out what the best thing to do as a parent is, and not just repeat what your parents taught you or forced onto you, then that's going to be the best way.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it comes back down to knowing clearly what your boundaries are. You mentioned clarity. I think that's real important. And just like I said, over the last few days, explicitly thinking about boundaries, it's not something I'd ever explicitly thought about. Like I said as well, they pop up everywhere.
Well, yeah. So, like,
Throughout
say
your life.
in that example that we're bringing up, so to have an unhealthy boundary would probably be to continue helping bailing them out, or bailing out is probably the best word, it is effectively enabling them. So in that sense, like a clear boundary with, like, obviously as a parent wanting to help their child, it's coming from a place of love for the most part. So having a clear boundary would be to say, like, well, look, I know you're struggling, or you obviously don't know what the circumstances to bring you to this point. I will help you if you choose to enter into rehab, or to quit your drinking or drugs or whatever it is. But you need to come to me when you're ready. I won't keep bailing you out. Like, it's clear, it's not cruel. Like, for the most part, you're setting clear expectations and consequences, but you're actually like providing them as a way out when they're ready.
Well, to me, that sounds super pragmatic and balanced, balancing that kind of masculine, feminine energies. You're being pragmatic and understanding while also setting clear rules.
I was just thinking, before we came together, I wrote down a question for both of you. If you could live a boundary-filled life without feeling guilty or cruel, how different would your life be?
This kind of relates to what I was saying about perhaps like envisaging yourself in the future to to decide what boundaries you need to come up with, I guess, to like form, again, boundary implying structure, what form you need to kind of take to end up the person or in the situation you want to be in. What would that look like? Well, do you reckon you need lived experience to be able to truly come up with like effective boundaries, or do you reckon you can just imagine in your head and then kind of reverse engineer boundaries to lead to that, to structure yourself to that outcome?
Yeah, maybe a mixture of both. Like lived experiences obviously help you because you have like a point of reference in hindsight when you look back on how to improve or whatever. But you can still learn by reading or researching. Like if it was a thing you just wanted to, like how do I have healthy boundaries? Well, you wouldn't necessarily have to live like that experience to still set those boundaries.
I don't think you need one, because we talked about business before. You can come up with a business plan. That's what I was coming up with, like a business plan. That's obviously, you do that before you do anything else. So you're kind of you're putting up boundaries. You're going what I'm going to sell, or I don't know, David, you might be more familiar with what constitutes a business plan, but yeah, you're kind of you're structuring it up and making boundaries. So if you can do it in a business sense, I'm sure you can do it in a personal sense in your own life, I reckon. But again, I think I'm pretty comfortable with my boundaries.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm
not.
a lot
I don't feel
better
abused,
at
used
it,
and abused.
I don't think my life would be drastically different to what it is now, because I think I've already made like a lot of those changes in the past 12 months or so.
Yeah. Well, how about this? What's one area still in you guys' life where you still need to follow up on your boundaries, or make some that you can think of?
Oh, probably.
Yeah, just think about it.
I think maybe like financial boundaries. So, like I still struggle, like say if you put money aside for food each week, like still want to buy like takeaways or whatever. And so for me, knowing like, well, I need to set a boundary if I want to, like one of my goals to buy a house. Well, that's not going to get you there. So that's probably one boundary for me, like a personal boundary. Another one's probably like, I guess like learning to say yes and no when it comes to social occasions. Because some weeks I'd love to just stay at home like every night of the week and get stuff done, or catch up on shows, or spend time with the wife, whatever. But also knowing like if I don't spend or feed into like relationships with friends, that you might be at risk of losing those relationships, unless they're just a good friend and you can pick up where you left off regardless of time. But like, yeah, from hindsight, like you have those friends, you're like, oh, we'll meet up, we should organise when we're going to catch up again. Time passes, you've never done that. Well, if you're not going to like do it then, well, you're probably at risk of losing that friend, or it just happens naturally. So those are probably the two key distinct areas for me.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
Yeah, probably just being more intentional with my own time. So yeah, being more clear about what I want to achieve in the day rather than just drifting through. And yeah, like social media, whatever it may be, probably I think setting clear boundaries and saying, look, I want to achieve this today, and therefore I'm not going to use social media, turn my phone off, whatever, until I achieve those objectives.
Yeah. I'd say that's pretty relatable ones. What was the list of the types of boundaries you had up? There was like the money, time. There were a few others.
So for personal boundaries, the list we have here, you have physical boundaries.
So it could be like exercise and on a physical boundaries.
More like personal space, physical touch.
I was thinking of like, not working out as much as you wanted or something. Well, setting up a boundary.
More like say you're like meeting someone. This might be a silly example, but like, do you go in for a hug, a handshake, or like a kiss? Like those sort of things. Like, yeah,
personal space.
Personal space. or someone like going through your, like, that was a thing when I was living at home, like your parents would, or mum especially, would go into your bedroom like while you weren't there, or like clean up and do stuff, and it's like, I get where she's coming from, but also like it's like a boundary broken on my personal space.
Yeah.
Another one is intellectual boundaries. So that's referring to thoughts and ideas.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, so like, for example, is it okay to talk to certain people about different topics like politics, or should we just talk about the weather? Like, you know, for some people, they might have issues talking about like religion or whatever, so it's like, well, you're not going to go in and start asking them, like intruding on their thoughts and ideas. Emotional boundaries, referring to a person's feelings. I feel that's probably pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Sexual boundaries,
Speaks for itself.
referring to the emotional, intellectual, and physical aspects of sexuality. So I guess more like that's probably more in like relationship based, like partners or husband, wife, or whatever, like knowing what your partner likes or dislikes, and like that safe space, I guess.
Yeah.
Material boundaries, referring to money and possessions. So that kind of tied in with the example we were talking about with like the parent and their drug/alcohol addicted child.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick, it'd be a time based one as well.
Yeah.
I think that's probably, it's got to be one of the more common ones.
Time's the last one on this list.
Right. Yeah. Just like consciously allocating time, like diarizing almost in my head. Time to,
well, in terms of time
relationship
boundaries,
to working out, and it kind of all bleeds into one at the moment. It's kind of boundary. Yeah, I can just go with the flow.
do either
That's
do
my
either you
natural.
have like a calendar or a diary or like
Not one that's active.
planner? Yeah. I go through phases. This is just my own awareness. I go through phases of like, like I've been really slacking and trying to get stuff done, so I will try like start like setting up my day, allocate this time for this, and work between these hours. Okay, I've got an hour after work to do vacuuming, cleaning, shower, whatever, and then obviously I want to try and exercise. So like you're trying to fit in these things, and you need your own personal like boundaries to prevent you from swaying away. But it just like it stops after like a day or two.
Yeah, my thought on that would be like, I feel like life is just too boundaryless. I feel like there's a kind of life or nature in general is kind of a boundarylessness and random, chaotic kind of nature to it. And so like if I was going to try and plan, especially more than a day out, it only takes one good friend or to someone to or something, anything to happen to throw everything off, and I just that would kind of just defeat the purpose of a diary in my mind. Something just completely knocking something out. And then
So are you're more of a spontaneous person?
yeah, for sure.
Right.
I definitely like going with the flow, and I'm well aware that doesn't
Maybe it's just
it's not efficient at all, like really at all. It's like I'll be on a day off wandering through the house, and I'll be like on the way like doing one job, and then just get distracted, like clean this up, clean that up, and then I'm not like banging things out efficiently. I'm just kind of doing half at a time, starting 5 jobs at once, which we all know is not good.
Yeah, I'm the
Yeah, and
complete
then-
opposite. Like I need structure and like order. So like I'll list out like a list of tasks that I need to do, and I'll tick them off one by one. Like it has to be in order, because
Right.
if something
That's
like
cool.
pops up or it throws me out, like it really disrupts how I like go forward.
Yeah.
So like that does make it hard in terms of like trying to do spontaneous things. Like for example, I feel like I've got my weekend planned, and then someone will be like, hey, you want to like there's a party on this weekend, or how we're like family's going out for lunch, or in-laws going out for lunch, do you want to join? It's like, wow, man, I thought I had like this day to do this and this, and this is what I wanted to do, and now like my whole schedule, everything's out of the whack.
Yeah.
So that does tie into boundaries, because
Yeah.
like if you know what you want, then it should be easy to say like no, or provide like alternative.
It's also kind of
arrangement.
like, if he wants a lot of things, like obviously for me anyway, I feel like, and I imagine you guys are the same, on a short time frame, like a weekend, I want to do so much. Like it's
Yeah.
not that I just don't have anything to do and don't want to do anything. So I want to do heaps. So I've got to kind of, rather than saying no to people, well, yeah, I suppose I've got to say no to people and things that aren't as important. So in that way, I kind of have to categorize it. But even like the weather has an element of boundarylessness. It all kind of bleeds into each other, and especially if you're trying to plan something, the weather will throw you off. But yeah, what would my life? Back to your original question, anyway. What would your life look like? A boundary-full life. I think it's something to aim for. I think we all agree that it's an attractive trait in a person. If you think about anyone you respect in your life, I'm sure they have quite clear boundaries, distinct boundaries, and they know what they want. And yeah, if boundaries are a physical manifestation of your like personality, then the more boundaries you have, the more clear your personality is to other people, which I suppose is kind of calming. If you know what to expect, you know exactly what a person's like, and they're not kind of lying to you in any way.
I just had this thought just pop in my head, which I think might be a good analogy to use. Like, say for example, you're driving along, let's say at Morehouse Ave, on a weekend, right, where it's at night time, where it's generally like quiet. So for the most part, you'll have green light after green light after green light. So if you are driving along and then like you come up to a red light, that's kind of like not having a boundary in place for something to help you succeed. So if you were living like a boundary filled life where you knew how to say yes and how to say no, or what you wanted, in theory you'd be driving along Morehouse Ave,
All greens.
all greens.
I see what you mean. I
That
see the
makes
metaphor.
sense?
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I don't know. That makes sense to me. I'd imagine that's what life would feel like, at least. Anyway, yeah.
And then if things go tits up, well, that'd be like a cop pulling you over or something.
Yeah, it's
on
the
side
element
the
of
road.
randomness.
Yeah.
But that's true, yeah. I can imagine, if I had to put it into words, I'd imagine it being a ride down Morehouse Ave, all green lights. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't be afraid of boundaries. I'm not gonna be. I might put some more up. Might go crazy with boundaries.
Yeah. That's
Might start making literal like making pillow forts around the house for me.
might build a wall or something.
Yeah, build a wall. Yeah.
No, that's the thing. Boundaries, though, it is quite it's quite broad, but it's also not at the same time.
Yeah, it's a very specific thing, but there's so many. The more you think about it, your own life, there's so many. Everything is kind of every yes/no decision is a boundary, a potential boundary.
I think we're missing our weekly example from David's family.
No, you mentioned.
Did he?
I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
Oh,
Briefly,
maybe,
yeah.
maybe briefly. It wasn't quite
Yeah,
the
so
same.
it's a classic counsel. That was good. I mean, yeah. When you suggested the topic, Nav, like I've said, never thought about it explicitly, but I'd encourage. It's been very valuable over the last few days thinking about it myself and just talking about it now.
Yeah.
Quite enlightening.
I think we're at like, let's say 40 minutes, which is quite short.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Maybe we'll just
Sounds
cut
good.
it there for this week and have a short one.
Yeah. Leaves time for people to have a think about it themselves.
Yeah, well,
as I
maybe for us
gonna
we
currently.
can maybe set some boundaries for this week as a challenge or a goal.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you're listening to, maybe that's something you could get involved with, and maybe like set a reminder in a week's time and check back and see if you've achieved or how
Yeah.
things have gone.
Yeah, I'm going to try and allocate my time better, my short amount of time.
Yeah,
Boundaries
well,
is
hey, the weekend's looking good, weather's looking good, so if you need to get some
Possibilities are
gardening done,
endless. Yeah.
you're gonna have to say no to some hangs.
Yeah. Don't ask me to do anything this weekend, guys.
No, it's
Right.
fine.
On that note,
Yeah, thanks for joining us for episode 8. Look forward to seeing you all for episode 9.
easy peasy.
Peace out.
Later.
Peace.